Good evening and welcome to another episode of the OSR Tabletop live stream with DM Bluddworth. I apologize for such a short notice. I only, this kind of impromptu. I only just decided about an hour ago that I was going to do this. Live stream, and what I wanted to talk about in today's live stream was a kind of a response to a recent D&D Beyond video that I watched with Jeremy Crawford and Todd Kendrick. Kendrick, I believe. I don't really watch the show that often, but this one really grabbed my attention. And let me start off with what we're going to be talking about, or what I'm going to be talking about. And now, of course, engage in any comments if anybody wants to chime in on these things. So this is my response to the D&D Beyond feat stacking backgrounds and hit dice sage advice for D&D. And what really attracted me to this was I caught just a very, very brief snippet of it. And Jeremy Crawford was talking about, the idea of canon. And then I went back and I started watching the entire video. And this is about 5 days old, I believe. So I started watching the entire video, and I was really quite surprised at his approach, because in recent past, I've been very critical of Jeremy Crawford and some of the things that he had stated, particularly when he was talking a couple months ago about canon and how D&D canon really only exists from 2014 and moving forward. And I thought that was a very unnecessary and dismissive a concept of what canon is, very reminiscent of what Kathleen Kennedy did with Star Wars, where she kind of just discounted all of the extended universe of Star Wars. There was no content after the movies, kind of a comment. And I looked at it the same way. There's no canon prior to 2014, which was walked back by Chris Perkins, within a day or two after that comment, stating, no, your table is where the canon exists. Your table is where the content is, and that's what Jeremy Crawford actually restates here, and so that's what really got me listening and paying much more attention to what he had to say moving forward. So he starts off, and I'm going to go with this next one. So he starts off with, what is sage advice, and is it official, and what is its context? So first he starts off by giving kind of a brief history of what is sage advice. And sage advice was a column that began in, I believe, Dragon Magazine number 31, or somewhere in the low 30s. And I think primarily, and I should have gone back, like I said, this is impromptu, but I would have gone back and looked at my Dragon magazines, which I have the CD-ROM here on, and see, I believe they were initially written exclusively by Gary Gygax. And Jeremy Crawford goes on to say that, the person in charge of, really putting together the rules or thinking about the rules or whatever, that current individual is usually the individual that is going to answer these comments or questions. And so that's why it's been called sage advice, going back to Dragon Magazine number 31, which was probably in the early 1980s. So then he says, is it official? He says, yes, it's official, but it's official based on what they're running. And so official of what they're running, yes, you can always point to it and say, well, yeah, that's an official ruling, but that doesn't mean that you have to run it at your table. And that's where his comment about what is its context. Everything boils down to what you're working with at your table, as far as the tools. And I like his description of, the rules in the rule books are tools that you're going to, as the dungeon master, you're going to look into your toolbox, and you might say, I'm going to now, I'm going to almost quote him exactly. I think I'm going to use a screwdriver for this and a hammer for that. I'm not going to use a saw today, and so on. So you're just picking and choosing the tools that you're looking to use in that current session or throughout that campaign or whatever. It's whatever you choose to use. And he says, and the purpose of all of these tools, and again, I'm going to directly quote him, is that these are fun tools. These are the tools that you're going to utilize in order to make your game at your table fun for your table's participants. For you as the DM, plus, of course, your players. If as long as everyone at the table is having a good time with it, it really doesn't matter whether you're using official tools, or if you're using your homebrew, or you're using tools from this edition or that edition. And so that's where I think that he really opened the door for the idea that you could pull from any number of sources and bring it to your table. And whereas they might not all be official with the capital O, the intent is that, and his design intent is that you're using tools to make your experience at your own table fun for everybody involved. And that's really what he's most concerned about. He actually lamented at some point that, it really, it upsets him when he hears someone using his own comments as like a wagging the finger at someone, saying, no, 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 Jeremy Crawford said this about, this is how you're supposed to play the game. And so, that was his whole point in that, was that these are the this is the intent. The design intent was for these rules to be chosen, or to be discarded or ignored by the dungeon master at your table. And you could have multiple sources for those as well. So, and I will just reiterate, the DM chooses the tools to be used, official or not. And that was the bottom line, what he was talking about. And I actually found, I was like, all right, we finally have an agreement on the real design philosophy of Dungeons and Dragons, going all the way back to its earliest days, and then bringing it forward. That the DM is just choosing the various tools to be used at his or her table in order to enhance the fun that's taking place at that table. Then they started talking a little bit about backgrounds, and here again, something that I was really impressed by, how he put backgrounds into its proper place and its proper context. And so let me just bring this up just to remind myself. So backgrounds and features are built for the world that they are in. This is particular to the Magic the Gathering world. So he was very specific in talking about backgrounds and features in the various source books that were based on Magic the Gathering, but he also extended the discussion beyond that. So first, he started talking about backgrounds in general, and he says, in many instances, players will create a background for their character. I'm not going to get into huge copious backgrounds, multi-page backgrounds, or very, very minor, low detailed backgrounds. I'm not going to get into that argument as which is what's the proper length of a background. But what he was pointing out was that, players will create a background, and that is supposed to influence their character as their character is moving forward throughout their adventures. And the DM is actually supposed to kind of know the backgrounds a little bit and hopefully incorporate some of a character's background into what they're actually doing. And so it becomes something that kind of flavors the experience for the player. But he said that as they move forward, backgrounds actually fade away and they fade into the background, which is part of their purpose, because you're supposed to be focusing on what your character is doing in this moment and what your character is moving towards, or whatever adventure they're on. How are they progressing forward? The story is the story that's being created is very forward focusing. Not that what's going to happen in the future, but that's what you're working towards. You're working towards experiencing the adventure and creating a story as you go, not so much what's behind you. I see I have a couple comments here, so let me jump in and say hello. Hello, Mr. Nerd Adventures, sorry. And we have Pia Daruan, good evening. Didn't Gygax say that the character's backstory was levels 1 through 8? I can almost guarantee you that he's probably said the backstory, and actually I'm almost convinced that he said that the backstory is from like 0 to 1. I don't know if 1 to 8 is, so 8's high. 8 is a high level character, so I think it's 0 to 1. But I'd have to go back and look at my look at Gary's book on game mastery and see exactly what he said on that. I know he said there was a range there. It certainly wasn't 1 to 8. I believe it was 0 to 1. Okay, good evening, Stephen. And good evening, Facebook user. Sometimes that's Max from Legion of Myth, but 8 is high. I think it's lower. It is lower. Yes, 8 is high. 8 is almost a titled level. In old school D&D or in advanced Dungeons and Dragons, your characters are actually lucky to get to 8. Background charts are a good start. Yeah, they have those like very simple things that they talk about backgrounds, where it's like you're just seeing like what your character's parents did as a profession, and that's part of your background. Or you might have a non-weapon proficiency that you kind of build into your character's background as well. So yeah, that's basically what he was talking about. But he also, and I'm talking about Jeremy Crawford, if you've just logged in, Jeremy Crawford was also talking about wanting to make backgrounds have a little bit more more connectivity to what the player character is doing moving forward as well. So kind of not to forget about and have it fade away, but to have some kind of a skill, or in this case, he's talking about a feature that is attached to it that you can progressively continue to utilize and maybe even build upon with stackable feats, which I'm going to get to a little bit later as well. Love the full family and background setup. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to go back to one of the banners so I can refresh my memory and see. So he was talking about backgrounds and features. So he started talking about some of the most recent setting books or quasi setting books that have been put out by Wizards of the Coast lately. So he's talking about like the Wildemont and Strixhaven and the newest one, which just lost my thought on what that's called. But many of them are introducing backgrounds and then features attached to those backgrounds. And he started to explain that many of these feats and these backgrounds are setting specific. All right. And again, that really takes a step back from some of the ideas of that were expressed, like as far as like the multiverse is concerned, or at least that's how I read it. Once he said that some of these feats are very powerful, but they were designed for, let's say, Strixhaven in particular. They were designed for Strixhaven, and so when you're running a Strixhaven campaign, it's really not meant as a design feature for you to then take that Strixhaven wizard or magic user and bring that character along with those very specific backgrounds and features into a different world setting, where all of a sudden now that background and feature might become, especially if it's stacked upon others, that might become very overpowered for that new setting that you brought it to. So this idea that some of these adventure hubs, such as Strixhaven or the newest one, gosh, I can't believe I'm going to draw a blank on what that's called, um, where you're supposed to have access to all different worlds. It kind of goes against that idea that you're going to have characters traveling to there, picking up these backgrounds and features from there, and then bringing it to other worlds where those backgrounds and features might not work very well, might throw off the balance. Let's see, somebody I hope is going to tell me the name of it. The exact number isn't really important. It's more that the low levels towards becoming herodom were the real backstory. Yeah, I mean, I personally look at it as being 0 to 1, and I'm very forward looking. As far as now, your character story is really beginning to come together. I run a BX game, and we have characters just hitting 3 or 4th after 6 months of play. Yeah, I'm in this very same situation with my AD&D First Edition. The characters are around levels 5 and around 5 or 6 for some of the faster progressing character classes, and we're into week 36. So we're moving along at around the same pace as you're talking about it. There's it's a good way to progress your characters in a and we're traveling almost like real time too in the campaign. So it's like the characters have been adventuring for about 36 weeks, and it might be 4 weeks, uh, 4 weeks longer, possibly, from some downtime that the characters might have had that we just kind of glossed over in real time. So, but yeah, it's good to talk about these, the idea of character or campaign length and pacing of campaigns when you're talking about various leveling and features and the acquisition of power. So you don't want too much power coming too quickly. No, it's not. Xandria is the world that it's in. Maybe it's not even released yet, or it's the one that just came out like last week, or they just started talking about last week. It's the one where there's no there's no conflict, and there's no no combat, no conflict, and it's a series of it's an anthology of adventures, but it does have some new feats attached to it as well. So it's not Wild Beyond the Witchlight either. The one book I hate the most. Yeah, it's. I mean, they also spoke about that as well, as far as the Magic the Gathering world settings, or possibly the Critical Role world settings are going to have features that you may not want to carry through to other. There it is, Citadel of something. Yes, the Citadel of something is something or other. Yes, that's it. It's the Citadel of, oh, for Christ's sakes, I don't remember. But anyway, it's not something that I would personally pick up, because it's just not Dungeons and Dragons to me. And that's something I was going to rant a little bit about as well. Is that as much as I kind of agreed with what Jeremy Crawford was talking about, in this most recent episode of Sage Advice. I still don't believe in the direction that Wizards of the Coast is taking Dungeons and Dragons, and at a certain point, I think they departed so vastly off the mark of what, in my opinion, Dungeons and Dragons is, that I really try not to describe their game in its present form, or where it's looking to go, as Dungeons and Dragons. So let's see. Let's get back to my banners. And so he mentioned very specifically that setting design includes world specific backgrounds and features, and that's something that I think at least a few of the people that I interact with, or at least one of the persons that I interact with a lot, you both on his channel, and this is J. Scott Garibay, and he occasionally comes on mine, or at least watches. I hope he watches some of my videos, so that we can have that interaction back and forth. But he has really bought into this multiverse idea, that you can take these characters and go anywhere with them. Whereas what Jeremy Crawford had just said was that these are world specific backgrounds and features that might not, you might not want to bring as part of your toolbox, into your campaign, and that's perfectly fine. I mean, he really opened the door for a dungeon master to say, no, that's not in my campaign, and that's okay. As a matter of fact, he says that's awesome if it is contributing to the fun that's being had at your table. And so that was the key for me in saying, what, I agree with him here. He's finally, at least in my opinion, extending out the idea that that we can pull from multiple sources, and specifically that what we're doing at our table, we might not look to pour it out to somebody else's table, or some other DM out there might say, no, you can't do that in my campaign, and you should be good with that. You should be understanding that every dungeon master's campaign is going to be unique to what they're doing at the table, and no amount of rules lawyering is going to make that the wrong way to play. Because occasionally you'll hear that amongst our our chambers of discourse. I don't want to call it an echo chamber, because I think many of us have different views, and sometimes they clash. So we're certainly not an echo chamber, not in the OSR. We have many different views, and then sometimes we conflict with each other. So it's it's just the idea that we're all going to take a different look at different rules and decide for ourselves, this is working at my table, might not work at somebody else's table, and that's okay. That's actually, a better way of of running these games is to be, aware that there's a lot of ideas that we could borrow from each other, or there's ideas that we can say, no, I'm not going to do that, and that's perfectly fine. So let's see, we got some more comments. Journeys through, thank you. Journeys through the Radiant Citadel. All right, so let's see what else we have here. Also, gaining skills, spells, and feats instantly can ruin the pacing. I prefer downtime as part of role-playing sessions after intense adventuring. Yes, and I utilize the same thing as well. We stick in my AD&D campaign. We stick, very very strictly to the training times and the training costs as well, at least up to level 9. Then at that point, I think I'm going to have the players where their characters don't have to have a mentor training them anymore, so they'll be able to go to level 10 from 9 without having a mentor train them to get up to that point, that they've mastered their skills enough that they can self-train at that point. And they'll probably have students of their own that they are training to offset some of that cost as well. RuneQuest has one of the best background setup systems, and if that's the newest one, because I just picked up the newest one a couple weeks ago, and I have to dig through the rest of the box set and everything like that. But that's certainly something that I'll take a look at and see. And you could copy, you could borrow from other game systems and port them into, whatever game that you happen to be playing. And so, yes, you can certainly borrow from, from multiple sources and bring it to your table, as long as it's a tool to make what's going on at your table more fun. You can't go wrong. It's too catch-all. I like my 5e games, but the setting lacks the mystery and discovery and awe of somewhere like Mystera. When you discover a Rakasta, for example, in the Isle of Dread. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of that has to do with the what the DM is doing at the table as well. I mean, you're talking about those things that are those flavor items that's really up to the dungeon master to create. I mean, the world of Greyhawk is pretty bare bones, and if you want to breathe life into the world of Greyhawk, you as a DM have to do that, and because those pages aren't jam packed with all kinds of information and all kinds of different plot hooks or adventure hooks or anything like that. I mean, everything you really do have to fill in those multiple gaps that are in the overall timeline of the world. And you're if you're not a very experienced dungeon master, then any rule set can come off very dry. Any world setting can be can lack that mystery and lack that sense of discovery. You really do have to create that. I'd prefer to have a bare bones world where I am forced to do that, than one that is very very fleshed out, where I feel kind of constrained within the lore. If it has a jam-packed timeline and you can only find a couple of years here or there where there wasn't much going on, and that's where I'm going to start the campaign, I'd rather have decades long gaps in some of the story, of the world, the timeline of the world. Also, little no chance of you establishing your own strongholds in Forgotten Realms. Yeah, so and Forgotten Realms might be the most jam-packed content-wise of game worlds, and so you can always, as a DM, strip that away. You know, you can just take the map and say, well, you know, this city is actually completely different or not even there anymore, and you can mess around with it as much as you want. Let's see. I'll have the idea, for example, upon discovery of the island dread, players can opt to forge out their own little kingdom if they wish to. Yes, it's a it's a sandbox element that should be you allow the players to make certain decisions about what their characters are going to attempt to do, and then every once in a while you'll throw them something that hopefully they'll follow for a bit. They might branch off, and I like to give them several different branches, or they can, my players will come up with something on their own and they'll run off on a tangent, and I let that run for a little while. But the main kind of quest line keeps on moving along. The world is a living place, or at least I try to create that feel for it. So let's see. Is that the new rune quest? It might be the new rune quest. I haven't looked through it completely. I have to get around to it. I have been very busy lately, and it's kind of hard to dig through everything that I've recently picked up. So, question: which D&D brought you into buying training to level up? AD&D First Edition is the one that I'm speaking of. I don't believe it was in. I don't believe it's in BECME. I think it starts in AD&D First Edition. Good evening, Indigo. Good seeing you. And let's see. So with the realms, you just stick with the original gray box. It's empty before all the stuff they added in second edition. Okay. Had pay training with downtime mechanics. Yes. And I utilize them to tweak them a little bit, but I utilize them for the most part, as is. Although I didn't create free training, which they can get with the quality. There's actually an adventure quality level that you can attach to player characters' performance during the adventures, and I utilize that as well. And so that adjusts how much their base cost per level they're looking to train will be affected by that modifier. Yes, Greyhawk. For me, I mean, I'm super biased, but Greyhawk is my favorite D&D world, just because I spent the most time playing in it, and I've now spent the most time actually running campaigns in the world of Greyhawk. So, for me, it's the one that I'm either most familiar with, most nostalgic for, and I just like it. I like the fact that you can take a great deal of liberty as to what you're doing with your campaigns, and still have it fit within the overall story of the world setting, the timelines. You can find huge gaps in the timelines where you can insert your campaign into. Yes, I don't have as much, familiarity with. I never ran in the Forgotten Realms as a player, or at least not, other than like maybe one shots here and there. But for the most part, I've played in Greyhawk. I've run Greyhawk, and yes, the players are the heroes, always movers and shakers within their limited region. I also like to make the players really understand that the world is a huge place, and they're still as great as they might become. Their impact is still not going to be felt, on a global scale. Regional, they may be well known and well respected, or hunted down if they're, if they're stacking up those powerful enemies along the way. But but they're not going to be shaping the actions of or the goings on of whole continents, or at least I don't think so. I'm not looking at it that way. On a national level, maybe like on a country, a whole country level, that's certainly within the possibility. Well, remains to be seen. I got to see where the players take the campaign as well. It's not in Beckman. Yeah, no, it's definitely first edition AD&D. He's talking about training for levels, training time. Okay, so let's get back to a banner here, and let's see. So feature stacking as a character power builder path. That was his actual wording, where feature stacking as a character building path. And he took it from, or at least it was also seen in third and fourth edition AD&D or D&D, I should say. And I've seen in other game systems as well, so it's certainly not unique. I mean, there's feature stacking in Mifrog. I'm sure that there's feature stacking in various Rollmaster or other game systems as well, where you have to take a prerequisite feature before you can get this more advanced feature, or there be there's various bow skills that you could have. So you might have precise aim, and then you'd have a piercing shot or something. I know it sounds very much like from a video game, but really, if you're looking at it, third and or certainly fourth edition was built around MMOs and MMORPGs, or just computer RPGs in general. And so some of that is carrying over into fifth edition. I view fifth edition as being a derivative of fourth edition, more so than fifth edition is a derivative of old D&D or AD&D first or second edition. So I do think that there's a definite break away from the old school versions of D&D than what you see now. And I guess there's both positives and negatives to that. I see more negative in it, but others might say, what, I like the way that the modern take on Dungeons and Dragons is. I just simply disagree. So, but again, that gets back to how much fun are you having at your table, and what's the sources that you're using to bring that fun to your table, and that's really the only thing that matters. So let's see. Who said that about that? That was Jeremy Crawford. Yeah, it's. I don't know if was Jeremy Crawford on the design team for 4E. I think he was. I think he was certainly playing it. That was the campaign that he was playing. He and Chris Perkins. But they certainly there is more of a connection between 5E and 4E than there is a connection between 5E and second edition AD&D or earlier. And he just mentioned in this video that he had done that there is a connection to third edition to a certain extent. So there but initially, third edition and even fourth edition, they were pre-2014. So initially, when he was talking about canon not existing anything prior to 2014, he excluded some of Wizards' own games that they created. And so that third and fourth edition, or at least the latter part of third edition and fourth edition, are what was not in his thought part of canon. But like I said, he's kind of moved away from that and opened the door for other sources of canon to be done at your own table. You decide what canon is at your own table. Yeah, I know Indigo. I'm fairly certain that they weren't. Chris Perkins might have been there, but he wasn't a lead designer. Um, but yeah, fourth edition. The fourth edition had different designers, and certainly third edition had different designers as well. Yeah. All right. It's the juniors from 4th that are left on 5e. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, they might have been. Was the designer for fourth edition Player's Handbook 2. Okay. So yeah, like I said, I haven't gone through and looked at the progression of different of the game designers through those through the core books of Dungeons and Dragons to see who was actually doing what. I vaguely know some of the other ones. I never ran third, never ran fourth, so it's just not there in my memory. Hey, solo RPG guy, how's it going? And I have done the research on it. Yep. So yeah, I definitely appreciate any of your knowledge on it. And like I said, I defer to others when when you're talking about topics that I'm not familiar with. It's largely the same. Yeah, they might have moved up. From a support role to a more lead design in a later editions. But my only argument is that fifth edition is more aligned with fourth edition, and really hard to see, especially with the most recent books. It's really hard to see any of that connection to old school D&D or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. At least for me, I I I think it's made such a departure from from those editions of Dungeons and Dragons that really I struggle to even call what they produce today as Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, to me, um, you know, the um, the Radiant Citadel has no conflict and has no, obviously no combat. It's basically a shopping mall sim, from what I understand. And Strixhaven is the characters are, going to school, and they're doing schoolwork, and they're, running a barista, stand, and they're just doing things that, have a very collegey kind of feel, but without any real adventure. Certainly not heroic adventure tied to it. And so again, it's a departure from um, the real essence of what Dungeons and Dragons is meant to be. It's meant to be a heroic fantasy, where the characters are a force of good working against various levels of forces of evil. And in order to have a heroic fantasy, or just using the term heroic itself, there has to be risk involved. There has to be goals involved in order to achieve. And you know selling a double latte, in Strixhaven is not a heroic, effort, and going shopping in the Radiant Citadel is not heroic either. Um, and what's really disturbing is that they've actually said there's no conflict in this. There's no design for it to be there. And I've asked if, when they describe, various stat blocks and everything, I was like, do they even have hit points, for these NPCs, or these NPCs are not meant to be engaged in combat at all. That's the other thing with Netherdeep, if I'm saying that right, um, where there's an adversarial or competitive NPC group that's in there that are supposed to be competing with the player party in order to achieve certain goals. And my question was, and I haven't gotten an answer yet, was that if these NPCs, are not given hit die and hit points and everything, then you're kind of shutting down the possibility or the probability that the player character group is not going to say, well, if they're competing with us, for the same goal, we could just take them out, and now we've eliminated our competition in order to receive this, to get to that goal. That's certainly how any of my characters would look at it. And as a DM, I think my players would be like, what? They keep on beating us to the goals that we're working on. How can we inhibit them? Or, if worse comes to worse, how can we, make sure that, they don't make it to the end? And, that to me, even though it's adding a PvP element to it, but that to me is real risk and, and real challenge. And so you kind of need that. And if they're removing it, then it's not D&D anymore. Let's see. The best thing to do with 5e is just ignore all the adventure content coming from within and look to a third party. And that's, the thing. I know there's been a big hoopla about Pathfinder or Paizo taking a Pathfinder adventure and converting it for use with 5e. One thing I've always heard about the Pathfinder adventure paths is that they're always well constructed. They're interesting and challenging and well constructed adventures, and that's very different than what I hear about 5e adventures, produced by Wizards of the Coast. Some of their best stuff is actually being created by third parties, and the things that WotC is really focusing on is rebooting first and second edition adventures, and slapping a 5e label on them, and even then, in some of the cases, they've watered them down and made them, less interesting and less playable than the originals were. So the fact that Paizo is making some of their adventure paths, or at least one of them so far, open for 5e players is not the sign of the death knell for Paizo, per se. I think it's just Paizo looking to open up the market to their game adventures, and then that might bring players from 5th edition over and say, well, if Pathfinder is producing, or Paizo is producing these awesome adventures, let me look at their game system, and which is not that dramatically different, and then say, well, I might as well just play that now, and grab their, you can very easily, as a player or as a dungeon master, get an adventure, getting an adventure path or an adventure module from virtually any fantasy RPG and convert it very easily to any Dungeons and Dragons, whether it be BX or advanced or 5e, and very easily make those conversions anyway, usually on the fly. Delving deeper is the Mac Daddy ODD Reborn. Yeah, I'm kind of getting kind of like drawn out on D&D clones. I have so many of them that I'm just not not going to probably pick up any more unless they're really, really just considered to be top notch and you can't pass them up. Essentials is also boring and stripped out of soul of 4e. It's no wonder 5e has turned into the reading rainbow of RPGs. Are you talking about the D&D Essentials box, or are you talking about OSE, Indigo? Paizo got started into the interest by being the main writers of Dungeon Magazine during the 2D, the 2D20 era. Delving deeper was free. Yeah, you take 5d6 damage, and then you can short rest and recover completely. Oh, 4E Essentials. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, Indigo. I just have the 4E core rule books, and that's it. So I never bothered with picking up anything. I wanted to make sure that I had, of everything Dungeons and Dragons, at least the four, at least the three core books, which I do have for, first edition on through to fifth edition. I do not see myself buying 5.5 or 6.0, whatever they want to call it. As a matter of fact, I'm looking to take my third, fourth, and probably fifth edition off my shelf, which is down in that bottom corner over there, and free up some shelf space, because I'm just limited in the amount of shelf space that I have. So that's certainly something I'm looking to do, is to clear off some space. I have the one ring up on top that has to go on the shelf. I have I just have a crap ton of games that have to fill up that space, and maybe I'll get a second bookshelf. I'm not sure. But some of it is going to move to the closet again. I can't disagree with 4E Essentials. It's a version of 4.5, and everyone was wondering what the hell is going on after WotC had come out with the 30 plus books. Yeah, I would have never been into it at that point. I'm OSR or death. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much the same way as well. But my OSR, of choice is true old school. AD&D first edition. That's what I'm running. I really can't see running anything else except for at a convention, one shots and those kinds of things. But if I'm looking to do a long campaign, my long campaigns are always going to be AD&D first edition. It's just the system that I just love running the most. That's a motto: OSR or death. Yes. So let's see. Let me take a look at a banner real quick. So yeah, that was pretty much that was the last banner I had run. That I typed up before we went live. This is, once again, this live stream is a response to the D&D Beyond feat stacking backgrounds and hit dice sage advice, which was from about 5 days ago, I believe. And Jeremy Crawford was on there, and he actually said some things that I agreed with. And I know some people are probably surprised that I'm talking about 5e, but I'm not really talking about 5e. What I'm talking about is Dungeons and Dragons, in general. And I can see now that he has backtracked a bit on that comment that he made several months ago, where canon is only fifth edition forward, 2014 and forward, and he certainly did open the door, to the idea that that's not really the case. That you can pull from multiple sources, and not just D&D sources, but you can pull from any tools from the toolbox that, as a dungeon master, you're going to have at your disposal. And you might find various tools that you're going to pull from different games or different editions of Dungeons and Dragons and bring them to your table. And as long as your table is having fun, that's awesome. When your table is not having fun, you need to modify what you're doing. Obviously, you have to see, what can I introduce, to this, to this campaign that we're running, or just in general, what can I introduce that's going to make it more fun. And so, whatever that's going to be, its source doesn't matter. It's just the effect of that introduction is what matters. If everyone's now suddenly having fun, then just roll with it. It doesn't matter where you're taking it from. So let's see. Yeah, actually, I'm going to go back to this one first. So I had sadly, yeah, I sold all of my AD&D. I sold almost all of my stuff back in 2000 at a yard sale, and was getting married in 2000. And it was just, we were in a small apartment, and so it was, just not the kind of room that I had to keep all this stuff. Plus, I really didn't see myself staying into the hobby, because I was doing more computer gaming in 2000, and certainly went through the 2002 through 2015 of almost exclusively MMOs. And after that 12 or 13-year stretch, I got burnt out from them, and just got reintroduced back to tabletop role playing. I've been here ever since 2015, and just replenished my entire collection, probably a little bit extra, of what I had or played back in the late 70s, early 80s. And now I'm basically have everything, including the white box, which is someplace behind me. You can actually kind of see it, but it's back there someplace. And that's, so yeah, I certainly regret having gotten rid of all that stuff, because I probably sold all of that stuff for probably less than $200 combined, and I probably spent nearly that much on certain individual books, in my collection. Well, actually, probably not quite that much, but certainly the most that I think I spent was like 130 on my 144 page deities and demigods. So I hear you. I just moved a new apartment and have to make room. Yeah. Yeah. It's the toughest thing of making room in bookshelf space and everything. It's like, now I have to plan, I would plan, if I moved again, I would have to plan, well, which is going to be my, my gaming room. Yes, it is. If I showed you, I have a Robert E. Howard collection that is, that's very darn close to what I have in the role playing games behind me, and that's I probably have about 50, probably about 50 books of Robert E. Howard stuff, original hardcovers, and just really really nice thing. One day I'll have to do a video on just my Robert E. Howard collection, but my favorite author by far, followed up by probably H.P. Lovecraft, and and then Lord of the Rings, obviously. But yep, that's Robert E. Howard back there. I'm still waiting for my hardcover to come in. Hyperborea. I got to double check and see. I don't think. I mean, I'm not going to play it off the PDF, so I'm waiting for the hardcover to come in. I think that's due in October. I'm not quite sure. Maybe in the summertime sometime. Hopefully soon. Yeah, termites eating. Yes. AD&D. So I sold them. The collector, still sad, but at least I have a copy of Osric. Yep, I have that back behind me as well. Although I'm not too crazy over. Like, I know it consolidates everything, but it's just such small print that it's hard for me to use. I prefer to use my, I use my AD&D hardcovers. While I'm running my games, I have them out there, ready to use, and just use them. And they're 40 years old and holding up just fine. Looking forward to Harper Kickstarter to film myself. Yeah. And let's see, sadly, most of my 2 ebooks got left on the side of the road when a drunk driver ran me off the road. Oh, sorry to hear that. Yeah, now I never played 2E, but I have almost all of the books behind me there. And, I did run it recently. Actually, I ran For Gold and Glory and wrote some adventures for that as well. And so that was, that was pretty cool. I like the system. I like some of the class features that are in there. So, like that aspect of it. I'm not a fan of ascending armor class. Even though I understand THAC0, it's not hard to understand THAC0. But I just prefer AD&D First Edition for the combat charts and everything. I never had a problem with using those, and there's just something about ascending armor class that I can't work into my head for whatever reason. Like I said, I can figure out the math, and it's not the math that's, just conceptually, I'm just so used to, the lower the armor class, the better your armor class is. So it's just a mental block on thinking of it any other way. Yes, he left this world way too soon. Yep. So let's see. Did I miss any comments? Looking forward to Hyperborea. Got that. The termites. We got that. Yes. So yeah, many of us have had the same experiences with our collections. I can see that. That's the downside to to just being in the hobby for as long as some of us have been, that as you're going through life, you kind of leave some things behind. And Yatui was THAC0 Ascending started in 3rd. All right, so yeah, I like I said, I don't like Ascending, and THAC0 was like I said, THAC0 wasn't hard to figure out. I know a lot of times people say, "Oh, it's so hard to figure out THAC0," and never had a problem with it. I'm thinking people that I played 2nd edition with, though, use Ascending. So I'm not sure if that is there a 2nd edition revised that uses it. Like I said, I truly didn't play 2nd edition other than looking through, some of the things I used for Golden Glory for second edition. So that's a retro clone of second edition. Yes, it's very simple. THAC0 minus the AC roll. The attack roll equals the AC hit. Yep. Okay. So let me just go back to my banners and refresh memory. So if you've logged in recently, so this is a response to the D&D Beyond feat stacking and backgrounds and hit dice. He went into, I didn't spend too much time talking about the hit dice, but he was talking about short rests and everything. And I really had no interest in hearing about, how to utilize differently hit dice when it comes to short rests and everything, because I don't use short rests. I never would. I think it's kind of silly that you can recover that much for, a 10 or 15-minute rest. I'm not even a big fan of, even though it is in first edition, that you can leave an open spell slot and then just study for 15 minutes to fill a spell slot that you have. I'm not really crazy about that, even though my players will occasionally use it. There's certainly some modifications I would do. And that gets back to what Jeremy Crawford was saying. There's certain things in the rules, no matter what edition that you're playing, that you just might find are not you're not a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of point blank for archers. I think it deals out too much damage, and just too often I have to come up with creative ways to prevent them from always shooting within 30 feet. There's other things as well in first edition AD&D that I simply don't use because I just think that they just don't add to the fun, and that's the key is, if a particular rule is not adding to the fun, then don't use it. And it's that simple. And if there's a rule that's missing that will add to the fun, then you certainly should consider introducing it. So it's whatever is going on at your table. Your table is the only community you should be worried about. And that's another thing, and that's an argument that we go back and forth over. That whole idea of the D&D community. There's no such thing as a D&D community, or the role-playing community, or the one that drives me crazy is the TTRPG the family. It's the only community that you should be worried about is at your table. That's who you're trying to keep engaged and entertain and have fun with, and that's the group that you're going to come back to every single week for weeks on end. And that's why it's so important for you to have at least in my opinion and many others' opinions. So I don't think it's a rare opinion or an uncommon opinion that the real experience of Dungeons and Dragons is long campaigns, long lasting campaigns with the same group of players, hopefully with the same group of characters. But if you have characters that die off, that's really part of the game as well. And the campaign will move on. The world story will continue to move forward, and how the players choose to engage in those events as they continue moving forward is really part of the thing. So you don't really experience the full essence of the game unless you've been playing for certainly beyond 6 sessions like they talk about in 5e. But I don't think that you really start to really feel that until the 6 month and beyond mark as well. And that's playing weekly, at least weekly for 6 months. Yeah, but they have no combat in there, Cal. There's no combat in it at all. So, and then that's my thing too about, about the Nether, the Nether Deep book with the adversarial NPCs or competitive NPCs that are competing with your character group in order to do that, in order to go for the same goals and everything. I want to know their hit points. That way, if you wanted to, you can just look to eliminate the competitive team, and that way you avoid having to be so pressed at trying to reach your goals or whatever. But yeah, that's this has no that particular book has no conflict. So to me, it's not a D&D source. Yes, it is. It's stripping them of their potential for heroic fantasy. So it's like force feeding them soy product. I don't know if they're good ideas. I really don't. I mean, it's I wouldn't even say that those are good ideas. I mean, if you're going to have a competing NPC group, um, I mean, that gets old after a while. I mean, you might have it happen once, but if they're going to be constantly, on your heels, or you're going to be constantly on their heels, always going for the same goals, at some point, it just makes more sense that you're going to look to eliminate them. And if they're not stat blocked out with hit points and such, and they're not, from what I understand, they're not even equipped for combat. They're not given any kind of weapons or armor or anything like that. You just have their personality and their goals and those kinds of things. So you're not even supposed to interact with them in a combat situation, which to me, that's just not what the game is supposed to be about. Yeah, I'm not sure where. So they already wanted backgrounds that give them fame. Yeah, and that's something that he brought up. I mean, even if it does have portals that go to other, planes of existence or other realms or whatever. One thing that Jeremy Crawford said was that many of the feats, and backgrounds that exist in these more recent source books are really meant for just those source books, are really meant for just those settings. And I will go back to his, nearly his complete setting design includes world specific backgrounds and features. I mean, that was almost a direct quote from him, that they weren't meant to be ported out to other places, whether the feats aren't supposed to be ported out or the characters aren't meant to be played. Your Strixhaven wizard is supposed to only be played in Strixhaven, and the feats and and the stackable feats that are in there will become too powerful once you leave there. That they're only meant to be in Strixhaven because there's not that much of a challenge in Strixhaven. So if you have a feature or a spell that allows you to stop somebody else's action, well, in a setting that's just about going to school, and selling coffee in the coffee shop, is not it's not as impactful than if you're in a different world setting where there's actual combat taking place, and there's you're using you're stopping another player character from doing what they're looking to do with a spell. That's really PvP, in my opinion, and so that's how it should be dealt with, in that case.
If you want to shut the lights up.
Cool off and spill coffee for fast smell. Yes. And spin it to innovation. Yes. Yeah, but you'll have to do so much work, I think, because I don't think any of the NPCs in the Citadel have any stat blocks. They're just not designed for that, and it's the ultimate invitation for murder hoboism if they were killable, because I'm sure that they're probably annoying as hell. The whole point of RPGs is tension and resolution. No tension, no point in playing. Exactly. You cannot be heroic if there is no real challenge or risk involved with what you're doing. You can't be heroic if there isn't a true sense of good versus evil, which means that you need irredeemable evil in the world for you to combat. With them, with Wizards of the Coast and and Paizo, to a certain extent, removing certain things that they feel are, that's a representation of evil, and so we're going to remove it. Well, you're removing some of the incentive of the player characters to actually fight against something, and so that's the problem with watering down Dungeons and Dragons to the point that it's no longer what its essence is supposed to be. Yeah, I saw a comment there that hasn't come up yet. Mostly, yes, mostly peaceful evil. Yes, indeed. It's well, we do know that Barney the dinosaur was not as pleasant as he's supposed to be, or portrayed. Obviously, the actor that was Barney. According to some aspects, they're bad because we don't know where the line is where bioessentialism gets bad in a fantasy game. Yeah, it is certainly within the lore of the game that certain creatures are irredeemably and created for the purpose of being a scourge on the earth, or on the world setting, whatever it may be called. And yes, but it's true. I don't know what kind of evil that would be. Probably chaotic evil. Yes, this is the most evil city ever made. According to some yes, this is the. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not going to spend $30 to get the PDF and actually dig through it. And It's just not something that I would include anyway and look to run. So you know, there's nothing really portable. Even the idea of the, you know, I mean, the Citadel is just like a, you know, an extra planar hub for shopping. It's a shopping sim. I mean, I'm waiting to see what's the next non-conflict setting piece that they're going to put into the 5e catalog. I mean, so now we have baristas, we have shopping. I don't know what's next. The D&D version of a hairdresser, I guess, is next on the line. And we'll go from there. But of course, they're not allowed to use any sharp objects, so no scissors will be used in this. In this particular one, because those could be used as a weapon. Yes. Well, he'll have to make him his beloved, and so that way he'll convert him over. So borrowing from Strixhaven, he'll be a paladin that went through Strixhaven and now has the social interaction, the highly mechanical social interaction skills of being able to make, the evil overlord his beloved. How many blarts, mole security are present? Oh no, there's no law enforcement either. So there's no true guards. They're called like shieldmen or something. They just walk around with shields and they, I guess, block other people from doing whatever because there is no conflict there either. So I guess you can't even have, maybe they have shields that block verbal arguments, but there's no conflict. So I don't know what they do. It's basically the defund the police version of a D&D setting. The story, folks. You didn't write that word, folks, right? It's supposed to be an FOLX. Have taken over and everything is boring coming out of one. Yes, it is. It's bland. I don't know what, first of all, you'll never see how well they're selling. And I don't imagine that they're selling very well. I'm not quite sure. Like they don't actually show how much money Wizards of the Coast is making for each of its divisions. But yeah, I don't see how these setting books are selling all that well in comparison to others, as far as once the people have the core rule books, they probably buying a lot of third party materials, if anything. Otherwise, the third parties wouldn't be creating as many 5e materials as they are if they're not selling either. Yeah, but those aren't evil races anymore. They've eliminated them from the, they want to, well, they go back and forth depending on the setting, I guess. So they're trying to introduce that idea that there is no inherently evil races. Unfortunately, I know I've seen the comment, recently, if Gary Gygax used species instead of races, probably would have avoided a lot of this nonsense that we're dealing with now. I think my character would have to go full murder hobo and see how the back of more. Yeah, that's what I said too. Um, I certainly said that with some of the other things too. I was like, no, I would definitely, I would definitely look to take out the, I wonder if the dragons in Strixhaven actually have hit die and hit points, or if they're just made untouchable, and so you couldn't actually you know topple one of them and take over control of one of these schools of magic if you were a powerful enough magic user, and you had a full party behind you, and just kind of disrupt everything. um yeah, just just none of those settings have any appeal to me whatsoever, and I would probably just go murder hobo through most of them anyway. Hey, how's it going, Nordic? Yeah, I apologize for only having like a 45 minute notice for this particular one. So yeah, so that's on me. It was kind of impromptu, and I've been having some trouble, just finding time over the weekends to do videos, and so a live stream is a lot easier for me to throw up there than to do all the other stuff I normally would for just a regular video. And so yeah, it was not very much notice for it. So so basically, for those of you coming in, let's see. Uh, I just got my dentures in there, a real pain. Oh, sorry to hear that. Um, yeah, so that's I'm probably looking at implants myself for soon. But yeah, can't be fun. So yeah, this live stream was mostly talking about, or a response to, and I'll throw it up there. So this was a response to the D&D Beyond feat stacking backgrounds and hit dice sage advice with Jeremy Crawford as the sage, the uh, individual talking about these various things. And I was really quite surprised that some of the things I actually agreed with, but that's primarily because he kind of backtracked on some of his previous comments you know um, of what is canon, and how each table sets its own canon, and how the game rules are just like tools in a toolbox that you're going to pick and choose as a dungeon master to use, and that you could use a variety of sources, so not just the 2014 and more recent. You can certainly go back to earlier editions or other game systems, and bring in whatever tools are going to make your experience at your table a lot more fun. And that's the whole point, is to introduce various tools that are going to enhance the experience that you're having at your table. And so I was really quite surprised, and happy to hear that he's at least backtracked on some of that harder stance of canons only 2014 and forward. He also mentioned, and I'll just throw this one up here, that that setting design, especially what they've been doing recently and then going forward, includes world-specific backgrounds and features that are not necessarily portable to other settings, because they might create imbalances and such that just don't work in those other settings. So that was another really important thing that he put out, was that yeah, some of these setting books, they're including things that that by design are meant to just be used there. So Strixhaven and the features that you have in Strixhaven are only meant for Strixhaven. You should not be seeing Strixhaven trained, magic users in the world of Greyhawk or in Faerun or, you know, um, unless they're going to leave their Strixhaven based feats behind, or only activated when they return to Strixhaven. That's not what they were designed to be. They weren't designed to be portable. Even though there is supposedly a multiverse, there's, you don't have to have features that are fully transportable to any place that they go. You can have features that are tied to just that specific world, and that's perfectly fine. I feel backgrounds for characters are overly done, and most of the backgrounds are idiotic and cliche at best. No one ever plays a simple farmer turned soldier or something anymore. Actually, one of my players does that. So, but they're old school. So, yes, you do have that in old school role playing. Maybe not so much now. Because no one wants to think of themselves as being of simple mundane startings and then moving forward. It's not the ordinary man attempting to do extraordinary things. So your Horatio Alger stories or you know your rags to riches are not things that they're looking for. They want everyone to, and from what I'm told, I've heard it frequently that most fifth edition campaigns start at level 5, or 6, or somewhere in those mid low levels, but still very few people look to start adventures or campaigns at level 1 and move forward unless they're using the essentials, but you're only going to run through essentials once, and they leave essentials at 6th level. So it's kind of insane how quickly you go up a level using essentials, the box set. Literally after 6 sessions your characters are 6th level, which is insane. It's taken my characters in my campaign 36 weeks for like the thief to hit 6th level. Most of the party is still 5th. We got gentrification. Yes, we do. Crawford was given permission for something that we never needed permission for in the first place. Nope, that's absolutely correct. I think he backtracked this due to the heat. And that was immediate too. Like I said, Chris Perkins came in like the day after and said, no, it's whatever you run at your table is what the lore is, and what the canon is. But he, at least to his credit, reiterated that in this most recent video. So I was happy to see that he has, obviously changed his tune. They have those wizards in Faerun. They're called Red Wizards of the Fae. Mm-hmm. I'd rather play an ordinary fellow who was a farmer or a clerk in a store that hears the call to become a paladin. Yes, that's exactly, that is what heroic means. That's the whole idea of it. Even though player characters are exceptional in many ways compared to the out of the monster manual human, peasant kind of thing, so they are head and shoulders better in most cases, but that's still giving them just a slight edge in early adventures. It's, you're not throwing gnolls at a party of first level characters, even though gnolls are only 2 hit die or 2+1 hit die creatures. They're they're very tough. You're not throwing troglodytes at a party of first level adventurers either. Just too powerful for them. That's why most people start off, fighting, the very cliche giant rats in the cellar, or kobolds, or possibly goblins. But you're kind of like second level before you really start facing things like orcs and such as well. So it's just designed to have that slow progression of both challenge and reward, to grow up and become that seeker of heroic fantasy. Yep. Yes, anybody that came to my table with a 30 page background character will probably die in the first 5 minutes. Okay, so we're coming up on like an hour and 35 minutes, so I'm going to wrap this one up. But I, really appreciate you all stopping in. And if you want to continue leaving any questions or comments once this goes on to, once this saves up on and uploads, as something viewable later on, we can, I'll address some of those questions and probably do a follow-up if anyone's, questions or comments are really, eye-opening and want to just spend some more time on it. So let's get a couple more comments here. If it's a long-term campaign, my players start their characters at level 1. Yes, always. I've never done any campaign that didn't start at level 1. Unless it was level 0. I've done a few of those as well. But yeah, level 1 is my base to start any campaign. Yep, you have a good night too, Indigo. And everyone else, once again, thanks for joining. I am going to wrap this up. And I'm running my game tomorrow night, and I look forward to being back and doing a video probably Thursday or certainly by Friday. Yeah, he's the first to die. Yes, we should set up another live. I've been looking at another module that's a solitaire module. I'll probably try to get my hands on. So yes, we should set up another live stream together, and talk about some other solo RPG stuff out there. All right, everyone, have a good night.